Breaking news. Burkina Faso just sent shockwaves across the continent. Free visa for all Africans. Headlines are lighting up feeds. Influencers are celebrating as if Traoré erased every single border overnight. But hold on, does this really mean 1 billion Africans can simply board a plane, land in Ouagadougou, and walk through immigration with no questions asked? Here's the twist. It's free, but it's not that free. The visa is still there. Only the fee is gone. And after all, this is more than paperwork. It's a message. Once again, Ibrahim Traoré, the young captain shaking up West Africa, is making the world stop and look. Now, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from today? Maybe you've traveled before and dealt with long visa lines. Maybe you dream of seeing Africa without barriers. Or maybe you've got a story of your own with visas and borders. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your experience. And if you're new here, welcome to Africa Daily Good News. This is the channel that brings Africa's biggest stories straight to you, in a voice that connects across America, Africa, and Europe alike. If you care about truth, sovereignty, and a little bit of satire, you're in the right place. So hit that subscribe button, join the conversation, and let's dive in. Because this free visa headline isn't just about paperwork, it's about power, image, and the future of Africa. And maybe that's exactly why the world is paying attention right now. Imagine this. A landlocked country in West Africa, often overlooked on travel maps, suddenly becomes the first to tell an entire continent, "Come in, no fee attached." That's exactly what Burkina Faso announced, and the world couldn't decide whether to clap or laugh. According to the government statement in early September 2025, Ibrahim Traoré's administration declared that all Africans, from Lagos to Cape Town to Cairo, could now apply for a Burkina Faso visa without paying a single dollar. This was framed as a bold Africa news headline, a gesture of sovereignty, and a strike against the usual paywalls of West Africa politics. But here's the catch. A visa is still required. The bureaucracy remains. Only the money is gone. And that paradox is where the story begins to twist. For many Americans, the word visa means a plastic credit card, not a border document. But in Africa, and especially in a place like Burkina Faso, a visa is the difference between being welcomed or being denied. So when headlines screamed, "Free Visa Africa," some readers imagined a borderless utopia. Yet in reality, it's more like buying a ticket online where the price is zero, but the security checks are still waiting for you at the gate. Think about the human side. Most people hate paying for permission slips. Whether it's a toll road in the US or an entry fee at an airport in Europe, money always feels like a barrier. Remove that cost, and suddenly the psychology shifts. A traveler from Ghana who once complained about paying $30 at the border now feels invited, even proud, to enter a neighbor's land. That's not just policy, that's emotional engineering. And maybe that's why Traoré pushed it, because people remember how they felt before and after a barrier disappears, even if the paperwork stays the same. Here's a short story that tells it all. A Nigerian student eager to attend a conference in Ouagadougou had been saving for weeks just to afford the visa fee. When the announcement came, he laughed out loud and said, "Now I can use that money to buy books instead." His journey is still tied to documents, approvals, and stamps, but the emotional weight of being taxed for identity was lifted. That's the kind of small story that feeds into a bigger movement. Africa's sovereignty doesn't always arrive with guns or speeches. It can arrive with the quiet removal of a fee. And here's the question that lingers in the background. Do you think removing money but keeping the paperwork really changes freedom, or does it just change perception? Most Americans, when asked in surveys, say they prefer less hassle over saving a few dollars. Africans may be no different. After all, convenience often beats cost. The irony is powerful. A poor country makes visas free, while rich countries make them harder. That contradiction alone deserves a pause. And from here, we need to explore why this announcement matters beyond travel, why it stirs both hope and suspicion, and why Traoré is willing to gamble on symbolism in a time of real crisis. Picture this. A headline screams, "Free Visa Africa," but the fine print quietly whispers, "Application required." It's a paradox that sounds like freedom but still feels like control. In reality, Burkina Faso didn't erase the system. It only removed the toll. Citizens from across Africa still need to submit an online application, upload documents, and wait for an approval email before boarding a flight. The difference is no payment screen at the end. And in the psychology of travel, that matters more than people admit. Americans often complain about the endless TSA lines more than the ticket price itself. Africans faced with consular red tape are no different. The process is the pain, not the money. Yet when the fee disappears, perception flips, and suddenly the same bureaucracy feels lighter. Here's the twist inside the twist. The government knows this. According to Africa news reports, officials deliberately framed the move as a symbol of African unity, not just cost-cutting. And symbols spread faster than facts. One rumor online claimed Africans could now just walk in visa-free. That wasn't true, but people believed it, shared it, and celebrated it. The story became bigger than the policy, because the human mind prefers a simple victory over a complicated reality. Think about your own life. If tomorrow the US said all driver's licenses are free, you'd still have to take the test, fill the forms, wait in line. But many Americans would cheer anyway, because money feels like the insult, while paperwork feels like the routine. Human behavior shifts when the insult is gone. And maybe that's why Ibrahim Traoré played this card, to flip emotion, not just regulation. A short story proves the point. A Kenyan entrepreneur flying to Ouagadougou for a trade expo told reporters that he once budgeted extra cash just for the visa fee. Now, with that cost gone, he redirected the money to marketing materials. "It's not the paperwork I hated," he said. "It was paying to prove I belonged." That sentence captures what Burkina Faso tapped into: the pride of belonging. So the question to you is subtle. What changes a person's behavior more? Saving money or feeling respected? Observations suggest most people in the West spend freely when they feel valued, and most Africans, when treated with dignity, will overlook the hassle. That's the hidden calculus. Traoré seems to understand. The irony, of course, is that while the world debates if this is open borders, nothing really changed at the checkpoint. The forms are still there, the stamps are still there, but on the other hand, perception changed, and perception often drives reality. Which leads us to the bigger puzzle. If perception is this powerful, what else could Traoré reshape by simply flipping the frame? Here's the contradiction. A tiny West African state makes visas free, and suddenly social media talks about open borders, unity, and African renaissance. But the same policy, if announced in Europe or the US, would be met with fear, suspicion, and even outrage. Reports from outlets like Africa News confirm that Burkina Faso's free visa is more about messaging than mechanics. Yet the message took on a life of its own. On TikTok, creators celebrated Traoré as if he had thrown away every passport stamp. On Facebook, users shared memes of Africans boarding planes with no questions asked. None of it was literally true. But truth isn't always what spreads. People prefer the myth that fits their hopes. And this is where Africa News becomes more than news. It becomes a mirror of desire. There's a mini twist here. Perception matters more than the fine print. And another inside it, governments know that perception can move faster than reality. For example, most Americans don't actually read the legal details of new policies. They react to headlines. The same pattern plays out here. A headline says "Free Visa Africa," and the majority accept it at face value. According to surveys, people often decide how they feel about an issue before checking if the claim is accurate. That's a universal habit, not just an African one. Think about how human behavior shifts. Before the announcement, traveling to Burkina Faso meant budgeting for both paperwork and payment. After the announcement, the paperwork stayed, but the emotional weight lifted. It's like going from dreading a dentist visit to being told the checkup is free. People still dislike the drill, but they no longer feel exploited by the bill. And that shift, subtle as it seems, can ripple into politics. Here's a story that shows it. A student from Senegal told a reporter he never considered visiting Burkina Faso before. "Too many fees," he said. But once he heard it was free, he called a friend and joked, "Now I've got no excuse not to visit." He hasn't even applied yet, but the change in perception already expanded his sense of possibility. That's not tourism data, it's human psychology at work. So let me put this to you. Do you think stories that bend perception, even if they blur reality, can sometimes achieve more than facts? If people believe they're freer, does that belief push them to act as if they are? Observations suggest that once people behave differently, the line between perception and reality becomes thinner than we like to admit. And this is why Traoré's move hits harder than the paperwork suggests. He is not just giving away a visa fee, he is crafting an image of Africa as borderless, united, and welcoming. And if an image can spread faster than a policy, then maybe his strategy is already working. The question now is not whether the fee is gone, it is whether the symbol can hold, and whether it can survive contact with real politics. That's where the story deepens, because symbols are easy to announce but hard to defend when power pushes back. And that's exactly where this story is heading next. Here's the shocker. While wealthy nations tighten their borders and raise visa walls higher, it's a struggling country like Burkina Faso that suddenly lowers the gate and waves an entire continent inside. Ibrahim Traoré knows this move is more than paperwork. It is theater with real consequences. In Africa news coverage, analysts point out that by removing visa fees, Burkina Faso positions itself as a champion of Africa's sovereignty. The message is simple. While Paris and Washington demand more documents, Ouagadougou offers a gesture of belonging, and gestures matter. They shape how nations see themselves and how others see them. There's another twist here. A country under constant security threats is the one opening its arms. Usually, logic says unstable states tighten control, but Traoré flips that script. He is betting that by offering openness, he gains legitimacy not just inside West Africa politics, but across the entire continent. And that gamble is risky because symbols can inspire, but they can also expose weakness if the reality doesn't keep up. Think about how people process contradictions. Most Americans, when they hear about border security, assume safety means restrictions. Yet here, safety is paired with generosity. It feels backward, but humans often trust those who give rather than those who take. Studies on consumer behavior show that people forgive flaws in a product if they sense honesty in the brand. Politics isn't much different. When a government says, "We welcome you without charging," it signals confidence, even if the bureaucracy stays. A short story brings this alive. A Malian trader interviewed by local radio said he had stopped traveling to Burkina Faso during the height of regional instability. But after hearing about the free visa, he reconsidered. "If they trust us enough to enter without paying, maybe the country is safer than before," he said. That's not a statistic. It's a shift in perception, driven by a symbolic act. So the paradox is clear. A poor, landlocked country that outsiders often dismiss is now dictating the emotional narrative of African unity. And on the other hand, this puts pressure on neighbors. If Burkina Faso welcomes Africans freely, how long can others justify charging fees at their borders? The policy sparks not only travel but competition, a subtle contest of who carries the Pan-African torch more convincingly. The mood is rising, because this isn't just about visas anymore, it's about the pride of leading a continental story. And from here, the question isn't whether Burkina Faso can afford the symbolism, but how far Traoré is willing to push it before the weight of global politics pushes back. That's the next turn in this unfolding drama. Here's the irony. In Europe and the United States, governments with massive resources keep inventing new ways to make visas harder, while Burkina Faso, a country fighting poverty and insurgency, removes the price tag entirely. On paper, this looks like a small change. In practice, it becomes a loud challenge to global norms. Africa news analysts point out that by opening the door to Africans, Burkina Faso is indirectly highlighting how the West keeps its doors closed. It's a comparison Traoré doesn't even need to say out loud. The contrast speaks for itself. Most Americans know the frustration of paperwork. A family planning a vacation often says the process feels heavier than the cost. Now imagine multiplying that by the layers of suspicion Africans face when applying for visas to Paris, London, or Washington. The free visa in Burkina Faso flips that feeling on its head. Instead of being interrogated or doubted, Africans are told, "Come in. Your presence is enough." It may be symbolic, but symbols change how people see themselves. Here comes a subtle twist. When people feel included, they tend to act differently. Research on social behavior shows that when individuals perceive trust, they're more likely to reciprocate with responsibility. A Burkinabe official even hinted at this logic. If we treat Africans as partners, they'll behave like partners. That's not just politics, it's psychology. And it contrasts sharply with Western policies that assume suspicion first and trust later. A short story illustrates it. A young woman from Ivory Coast interviewed at the border said she had postponed visiting her cousin in Ouagadougou because of the visa cost. After the new policy, she crossed within days. "It feels like they finally believe we belong together," she said. That sense of belonging didn't erase checkpoints, but it changed her decision. One small policy, one real human journey. So here's the deeper layer. While the West still debates whether Africans deserve easier entry, Burkina Faso turns the question around. What if unity is the baseline and separation has to be justified? It's a reversal of the usual equation, and it forces other African governments to explain why they keep charging for the same permission. And the more this comparison spreads, the more it becomes a political weapon. Because the global South has been demanding dignity for decades, and now a small country is showing how to perform it in practice. The stage is set, but the real test is coming. Whether this symbolic generosity can survive the harsh realities of power, money, and pressure from outside. And that test is already beginning to unfold. Here's the paradox. The gesture that cost Burkina Faso the least may end up buying it the most influence. By scrapping visa fees, a poor state has placed itself at the center of a continental conversation about freedom, dignity, and identity. Africa News coverage makes it clear. This isn't a revolution in border control, it's a revolution in perception. The rules are still there, the stamps are still required, but the symbolism now carries more weight than the paperwork. And symbols, when repeated, tend to grow into reality. That's how politics often works. People act as if change has already happened, and in time it starts to. There's a deeper twist beneath the surface. When one country makes a symbolic move, others are forced to respond. West Africa politics is built on pride as much as policy. Neighbors like Ghana, Ivory Coast, or Senegal will now face pressure from their own citizens asking, if Burkina Faso can welcome Africans freely, why can't we? What began as a local decision could spread like a domino effect, not because the economics demand it, but because the psychology does. Most Americans are familiar with this dynamic in everyday life. Once a company offers free shipping, customers expect every competitor to do the same. Once a city lowers bus fares, neighboring towns face demands to match. Human beings notice differences and turn them into comparisons. And in Africa, comparisons quickly become political debates. A short story captures the ripple effect. A Ghanaian journalist tweeted after the announcement, "For years we've called ourselves ECOWAS brothers, but only Burkina Faso just proved it." That single line was shared thousands of times, not because it contained new data, but because it exposed a truth people already felt. The sense of hypocrisy and regional unity suddenly had a spotlight, and the pressure shifted. So the question sits quietly in the background. Can symbols alone carry a country through storms of reality? If people believe in unity, they may behave as if borders are softer, and behavior itself starts to blur lines on the map. Observations from social psychology show that when individuals are treated as insiders, they begin acting like insiders, and that changes how communities form. And this is where Traoré's move feels larger than it looks. On paper, it's just a fee removed. In practice, it may be the seed of something deeper. A continental mindset shift where belonging is assumed and division has to be explained. Whether this grows into policy across Africa or collapses under external pressure is still uncertain. But for now, the image of Burkina Faso as a door held open is strong enough to reshape the conversation. And that image, simple but defiant, is exactly where the story points next. toward the broader struggle over who gets to define Africa's future and on whose terms. Here's the contradiction. A country battling insurgency, poverty, and global pressure somehow just became the face of African openness. While richer nations raise walls, Burkina Faso lowers one. And in that reversal lies a truth too big to ignore. The news is simple. The visa fee is gone. The story, however, is much larger. African news outlets describe it as a symbolic leap toward Africa's sovereignty. Ibrahim Traoré has turned a bureaucratic adjustment into a continental headline. And that's where the mini twist sits. The world thought money was the barrier, but what people celebrated was the feeling of dignity. Think about human behavior. Before this move, Africans traveling regionally often saw borders as checkpoints of suspicion. After it, the mood shifts, not because the process vanished, but because the insult of payment was removed. Most Americans know this pattern too. Studies show consumers tolerate waiting lines if the product feels fair, but anger rises the moment they feel overcharged. People can endure hassle, but they resist humiliation. That's the psychology Traoré tapped into, and that's why the announcement resonates far beyond West Africa politics. A final story captures it. A traveler from Cameroon posted online that he still had to apply for the Burkina Faso visa, still had to wait, but when the approval email came with $0 charged, he said he felt respected for the first time. That's not a legal reform, it's an emotional victory. And emotions, once triggered, rarely stay contained. So the bigger question remains. Will this spark a wave of change across the continent, or will it stay as one bold experiment in Ouagadougou? Symbols can inspire, but they also attract resistance. Maybe this is just a gesture. Or maybe, years from now, people will look back and say this was the day Africa started tearing down its own barriers. What do you think? Is Burkina Faso's free visa a genuine step toward unity, or just a clever move that feels bigger than it is? Share your thoughts. We want to hear your perspective. And if you're new here, welcome to Africa Daily Good News. This is where we break down the headlines, challenge the narratives, and tell Africa's story with clarity and courage. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps this channel grow and keeps these stories alive. Stay tuned, because the next chapter is already unfolding, and it may shake the balance of power even more than this one.